Before scrapbooking became a verb with its own subculture, color-coded pens and hashtag, it was an object owned by my mother and grandmother. Perhaps yours did too. Go ask your grandmom. Better yet, open that creaky Godrej almirah of hers and search for it. Look behind her soft cotton saris, perfumed and protected by naphthalene mothballs, camphor and neem leaves. This is how my writing process begins. Writing in its most fundamental aspect is about representation. It's about taking something in the physical world and converting it into words and sentences. But it's a lot more than that. What you hope to do as a writer is to take a physical object and shape and convert it into metaphor for memory, identity, history, and myth. So in that sense, it doesn't really matter what the object is. What matters is how you as a writer perceive it, how you connect with it, and then how you are able to shape and convert that connection into something meaningful for your audience. Let me give you an example. We began the story by looking into a grandmother's almirah, and you are confronted by neem leaves, naphthalene mothballs, and camphor. At least that's what I was confronted with when I opened my grandmother's almirah. Perhaps you'll see three different objects. And on the surface, these are three random objects. But when you look deeper with a diffused eye, and no, that's not a contradiction, that's a practice. Being both present and permeable to influence is essential for creative work. You have to connect with the object in a deep and penetrating way, and at the same time be diffuse and loose enough to be open to influences. Indian poetics calls this pratibha, or a flash of insight. It occurs when you least expect it, like when you're in the shower. There are a few things that are necessary but not sufficient in order to get these flashes of inspiration. Being jobless, being bored, being not on your smartphone is necessary. But when you allow yourself to be in this loose yet focused state, you will see what French poet Charles Baudelaire called a forest of living symbols all around you. What do neem leaves, naphthalene balls, and camphor have in common? To me, and this came after a lot of thought and a flash of insight, and yes, it's not a contradiction, just a practice, like I said. To me, these three objects could represent the sweep of Indian civilization. How, you ask? Well, here are the connections I made. 3 is a powerful number in India. We submit forms in triplicate. We have the divine trinity in our creation myth in Hinduism. Our national flag has a tiranga, or 3 colors. Classical Indian dance form have the tribanga. So we have trinetra, or the third eye. So these three is important. Naphthalene mothballs came with the British, afraid as they were of the verdant wildlife surrounding them. So they were worried about insects and moths invading their colonial bungalows, so they put naphthalene mothballs into all their cupboards, and we continue the practice. As far as camphor goes, it is a sacred object that we use for our aartis, and we also use it for profane reasons to protect our clothes. This juxtaposition of the sacred and the profane is common in India, where women wear priceless jewelry, and yet they will go to Malleshwaram market and haggle for chappals for 100 rupees. We also do makeshift, or what we call jugaad. We take what we get and put it to multiple uses. So neem leaves are used to protect clothes. But neem, or Azadiracha indica, is one of the earth's most ancient trees, and it is native to India. It exemplifies the Indian love affair with nature, where we have trees populating our stories, myths, and songs. Today, neem along with moringa and turmeric have become global health superstars that have been usurped by fitness fiends who drink chai latte and green goop. But neem belongs to us. Our grandmothers used neem to protect their clothes and also as bookmarks for their scrapbooks. Pinterest is perhaps today's largest scrapbook. But now, and this is the nub of my talk, I would like to make a case for why physical objects matter in this largely digital world, which is odd because I am a writer and I inhabit the world of representation, and most of the time I spend tapping away on my computer. And yet, more and more I'm convinced that connecting yourself to something tangible, physical, is very important, not just for emotional well-being, but also to open the well of creativity. Our ancestors, and I don't mean Indian ancestors, I mean all humans engaged with the physical world in ways that were deep, meaningful, and sensual. They wove clothes, they fashioned pots, they worked with the earth, they seeded, planted, harvested. But today, our lives largely play out on screens everywhere. And thanks to social media, everything is like writing, representation, not the real world. We don't portray our real world on social media. It's all representational. So I'm not here to tell you to, return to some nostalgic utopia. I'm not a Luddite. I don't think we can turn back the clock. I enjoy apps, smartphones, Instagram as much as the next person. But I have also come to believe that engaging with the real world is a physical act, not a virtual one. I mean, journaling on an app is an oxymoron. You have to take the pen and write. So we have to figure out a way, a strategy really, to get ourselves removed from our screens and engage with the physical world. One way to do it is to cultivate hobbies that make you actually physically engage, like gardening, like flower arrangement. Another is to engage with activities and communities that take you away from the screen. You could use your body as a tool and become a dancer or a martial artist or a sports person. Even with writing, instead of tapping away at the screen, which is easy for me, sometimes I force myself to write on paper with a fountain pen. And I try to keep a scrapbook. I was delighted with this prompt because to me the scrapbook represents a certain type of physical object that's hard to duplicate in the virtual world. What type of books did our ancestors write? Not read, write. To me, they wrote 3 types of books. One was a daily diary that many of your uncles, aunts, grandparents still do. They write every day in their diary. The other is an account book where a list of payments and income was noted. How much I paid for vegetables, how much did I give the Iron Man. This was an accounting book that many people still keep. And the third is a scrapbook. A scrapbook, unlike the first 2, is a repository. Unlike a diary or an account book, it is a repository of a person's dreams, hopes, intents, and ambitions. In that sense, it's both forgiving and all-encompassing. One of the most common ingredients in a scrapbook is recipes. Not just any old recipe. People will cut out recipes for lemon souffle or badam halwa or paneer, makhan, malai, do pyaza. These aren't just simple recipes. They are our intentions for identities that we want to fashion. They are our dreams of ourselves. We may not enter the kitchen. We may not know how to make chai. We may burn toast and curdle coffee. But in our mind, when we cut out that recipe for lemon souffle from Good Housekeeping magazine or Women's Era, we are domestic goddesses, legends in our own mind. So this is the power of a scrapbook. The second most common thing in a scrapbook is a whole list of to-dos. How to embroider, how to crochet, how to do tatting. Do you know what tatting is? I had to learn tatting as a child because my mother had this in her scrapbook. It's a very complicated list. You have to do knots and loops and make these doilies. And that came out of a scrapbook. The third ingredient in a scrapbook is randomized clippings that epitomized a person's relationships. There was some obituary of some uncle who passed away. There was a phone number of a relative who would show up at home. There was a random list of numbers of, what we gave the dobi. There were clippings from greeting cards. There was a certain flower that was clipped out because it looked nice in a birthday card. So this is just random stuff from a person's life. But when you see it in its entity, in its whole, it represents an identity of one person's life in time. I have written 4 memoirs, which means that I use memory to fashion a tale. For my last book, Food and Faith, I traveled all through India to visit shrines. And here's what I noticed. It doesn't matter what your faith is, whether it's Christian, Buddhist, Sikh, Jewish, Hindu. All faiths use physical objects to access the divine. Christians may light a candle, Muslims may light the incense, and Hindus may light the diya. But the goal is the same, is to use light to access God or your soul. Poet William Blake talked about seeing the world in a blade of grass and heaven in a wildflower. But for that, you have to go outside and smell the wildflowers, isn't it? The tools of my trade are the alphabet. Alpha and beta, which conjoin together to create the alphabet. Today, Greek alphabets have taken on a whole new sinister meaning. So here's what I'd like to end with. I'd like to end with a new approach to the physical world. Today, social distance between humans has become the norm. Consider connecting to the physical world in a way that goes beyond just looking at it. Devise activities that take you far deeper into the physical world. Climb mountains, hold rocks, smell flowers, listen to birds, use all your senses. When you walk around the gardens, touch the leaves. I've been doing this, and the most wonderful thing that I've noticed is that no leaf feels the same. Every single one is different. No duplication in nature. So in that sense, the world awaits you. Go discover it. Thank you.